This presentation provides an introduction and welcome to CIV5314. So let's begin with the big picture. This unit's about planning urban transport systems, and my aim is to get you thinking clinically about the role of transport systems in urban areas. This is going to mean putting urban areas under the microscope and really understanding the relationship between their transport systems and the type of city that they are. Hopefully, by the end of this unit, you're going to see cities in a different way, a bit like wearing a new pair of glasses for the first time when you look out and the world looks a lot crisper than it was in the past. That's the big picture, but let's now look at what the learning outcomes are for this unit. At the end of this module, you should be able to appraise the framework used to undertake urban transport planning and its capacity to deliver sustainable transport outcomes, discuss the factors influencing the level, pattern and trends in travel demand, appraise the characteristics of a range of passenger and freight modes, and assess the potential impacts of policy options designed to enhance urban transport systems. So after that very general introduction, let's turn our attention to some key details for studying CIV5314. I'm going to talk briefly about the sequence of topics in the unit, address the assessment mix and the format of the unit, my workload expectations of you, study tips, and some tips on making the most of your reading. This diagram shows the sequence in which we'll deal with topics in CIV5314. The first couple of weeks lay the foundations by introducing strategy, sustainability, and the rational and advocacy coalition models of planning. We then look at transport and land use interaction, objectives and targets, and appraisal and evaluation. We then consider two parallel concepts, I suppose, demand and supply, and we bring those together in a topic about integrated transport strategies. The final 2 weeks of the semester deal with some more challenging topics around how we might accommodate uncertainty in transport planning, and that's the role of scenarios and real options analysis. And finally, we look at the real challenge: how do we fund urban transport systems? The assessment mix in this unit are a 50% exam and 50% continuous assessment. The continuous assessment is 2 assignments, a transport and land use interaction paper and a transport policy analysis paper. The exam is 2 hours, it's closed book. The exam preparation guide will be made available later in the semester. It will explain the nature of the exam and include practice questions from past exams so that you can be ready for your end of semester exam. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm adopting the flipped classroom approach in this unit. That means it's important that you complete the necessary tasks before coming to class. Class time is not going to be used for me delivering a lecture. Before class, you need to have watched the recorded lectures and completed the required readings. And keep in mind, those required readings are examinable. As I said earlier, the class time is not going to be there for me to deliver content. We're going to focus on question and answers about the recorded lectures, discussing the required readings, a range of individual and group learning activities, and we'll also have a couple of excursions. Post-class, you work on your assignments, you do the prep for the activities for the next class by doing the video lectures and the like, and that's also the time when you'll do your private study and revision. Expect to spend about 12 hours a week on this unit. 2 hours of that will be in the pre-class activities, such as the online lessons and preparing the readings. In class, you'll be doing learning activities including discussing the readings and investigating particular problems. Required reading will make up another 3 hours, assignment preparation a further 3, and you should be allowing about 2 hours a week for private study, including preparation of summaries and revision. I said this is a demanding unit, but here are some tips that will help you get the most out of your study this semester. To learn successfully, you need to make some time to study regularly, and I'd suggest that you schedule some dedicated time, like you were making a meeting with yourself, rather than saying, oh, well, I'll see when I can find the time over the week. Set some study goals, not only about what you want to achieve overall in this unit, but also each time you sit down to do a period of study. Become an active learner, not just a passive reader, and make the time to recall and discuss what you've read with others. Now, this can be through the discussion forums or discussing it with friends or colleagues. I think this is a really important part of the learning process, which will get you to engage more deeply with the material that we're covering this semester. It's important that you make the most of your reading. As I said earlier, there are a number of required readings in this class, and the required readings are examinable. But I'm not going to be asking you about minute details, like what's the capacity of an articulated bus in Curitiba. But to do well on the exam, you need to be able to respond to the questions about the readings and be able to bring concepts from the readings into your answers. I strongly recommend that you adopt a layered approach to your reading. Do a pre-read of an article. Read the abstract, read the first sentence of each paragraph, and review each figure and table. At that point, your understanding of the paper will be limited, but write up some sort of a diagram, a learning diagram, or a summary. I find mind maps are very, very useful in that context. And at that point, note any questions which come to mind, or frame a couple of questions you'd like to get answered when you read the paper in more detail. Then I suggest you return to the paper, ideally a little bit later rather than immediately. And this is when you're going to more thoughtfully review that paper. Keep those questions in mind that you had when you did the pre-read, because then you're going to approach the paper, reading the paper in detail, like a detective, wanting to get answers to those questions. And they give you a purpose for your reading. After you've read the paper in more detail, go back and enhance your learning diagram, because that becomes the summary that you can then use when you're preparing your exam revision. So I'll take a moment just to provide some reflections on previous semesters. When I've observed the performance of students in this unit before, I think a critical success factor is allocating sufficient time for this unit. I mentioned that the general expectation, and this is consistent with what Monash advises, is up to 12 hours per week. Obviously, the time that you'll need to spend is going to depend on a whole range of factors, how familiar you are with the topics, how fast you are as a reader. But in the past, some of the students who did not do well in this unit mentioned to me afterwards that they were only spending 2 to 4 hours a week on this class. And that's really not a recipe for success. I'm not saying that everyone has to do the full 12, but if you're only allocating 2 or 3 or maybe 4 hours a week, that's not going to be enough to do well. A critical factor, apart from watching the recorded presentations and doing activities, is keeping up with the readings. There are a number of them, and some of them are not a light read. Leaving them till the end of the semester is a formula for disaster. As you do each one, adopt that layered reading approach that I described earlier, and do a learning diagram or a mind map when you finish each reading, because that should be the basis for your revision rather than having to go back and reread the paper. And I really encourage you to start your assignments early, not the week before they're due. And each time you spend a period of time on an assignment, finish that block of work by identifying what's the very next step, the very next thing I need to do on this assignment, and then allocate a time when you're going to do that task. Because again, leaving the assignments till the last minute is not a recipe for success. Now, if you've got questions along the way, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me. You can use the discussion forums on the Moodle site to ask questions. You can drop me an email. If you are emailing me, please make sure that you put CIV5314 in the subject line so that I know it's a question from a student. You can give me a call. If you're in Melbourne or if you're on campus, call in and see me. I'm looking forward to this unit this semester. This is a subject that I always enjoy teaching, and I hope that you'll enjoy the journey in the 12 weeks ahead.